I discovered the $50 fine taped to my front door on a Tuesday morning in February, when the wind chill in Burlington, Vermont was sitting at a bone-numbing -15 degrees. The notice, printed on official Pinewood Estates Homeowners Association letterhead, stated that I was in violation of Section 12.3.7 of the Community Bylaws for maintaining visible outdoor equipment in a manner inconsistent with the aesthetic standards of the neighborhood. The offending item: my snow shovel, which I had left leaning against the side of my garage after clearing my driveway at 6 that morning. I stood there in my bathrobe, coffee mug steaming in the frigid air, reading and rereading the notice. My name, Vincent Garrison, was spelled correctly at the top. The date was accurate, but the actual content seemed like something out of a fever dream. I had lived in this planned community for 3 years, and while I knew the HOA had a reputation for being particular, this crossed into absurd territory. We lived in Vermont. It was winter. Snow shovels were not decorative items but essential survival tools. The notice was signed by Karen Crawford, the president of the Pinewood Estates HOA board. I had met Karen exactly twice since moving in. The first time was at a mandatory new homeowner orientation, where she had spent 45 minutes explaining the importance of mailbox uniformity and approved exterior paint colors. The second time was when she had knocked on my door to inform me that my welcome mat was a 1/4 inch too wide according to HOA specifications. I had thought she was joking. She was not. I pulled out my phone and called my neighbor, Marcus, who had lived in Pinewood Estates for 8 years and had warned me about the HOA during my first week here. "They got you too," Marcus said instead of hello. "What do you mean, too? Check the neighborhood Facebook group. Karen has apparently decided that visible snow shovels are her new crusade. 7 people got fined this morning." I pulled up the private Pinewood Estates Facebook group on my laptop after going back inside. Sure enough, the page was exploding with angry posts. Jennifer 3 houses down had received the same fine. So had the Mitchells on Oak Drive. Robert from the corner lot had posted a photo of his fine along with a picture of his snow shovel, which had been placed in the designated storage area behind his fence, exactly where the bylaws stated outdoor equipment should be kept. He had still been fined, because apparently you could see the top 3 inches of the shovel handle if you stood at a specific angle on the sidewalk. The comments were a mixture of outrage and resignation. Several longtime residents mentioned that this was typical Karen behavior, that she went through phases where she fixated on different rule violations. Last summer, it had been garden gnomes. The year before that, she had waged war against basketball hoops. I scrolled down to find Karen herself had posted a lengthy explanation at 7 that morning, right around the time I had been finishing my driveway. Her post began with "Dear neighbors and fellow community members," and went on for 6 paragraphs about property values, community standards, and the importance of maintaining the pristine appearance that made Pinewood Estates the premier planned community in Burlington. She included multiple references to specific bylaw sections and reminded everyone that fines would double if violations were not corrected within 72 hours. I looked out my front window at my snow shovel. It was blue and plastic and completely unremarkable. It was leaning against the beige siding of my garage, near the side door I used to access my trash cans. The placement was practical. I used that shovel multiple times a day during Vermont winters. Storing it in the garage or backyard would mean trudging through snow to retrieve it every time I needed to clear a path. The fine seemed designed more to generate revenue than to actually improve the neighborhood. At $50 per violation across 7 households that I knew about, Karen had just brought in $350 for the HOA in a single morning. I wondered how many other people had been fined that I did not know about. I decided to call the HOA office. A recorded message informed me that the office was open Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 10 to 2, and that all inquiries could be submitted via email. Today was Tuesday, so I sent an email. I kept it polite and straightforward, explaining that I was a working professional who needed quick access to my snow shovel during Vermont winters, that the shovel was not visible from the street and was placed in a practical location for frequent use, and that I believed the fine was unjustified based on a reasonable interpretation of the bylaws. The response came within 30 minutes. It was from Karen personally, not the general HOA email. She wrote that the bylaw was clear, that I had admitted to violating it, and that the fine stood. She added that if I wished to contest the decision, I could appear before the HOA board at their next monthly meeting, which was scheduled for March 15th, more than 3 weeks away. 3 weeks in Vermont winter meant at least 6 or 7 more snowfalls. The forecast for the next week alone showed 3 separate weather systems moving through. I could not leave my snow shovel inside for 3 weeks. That was not just impractical, it was ridiculous. I called Marcus again. "How do people usually handle these situations?" I asked. "Most people just pay the fine and move on. It is not worth the headache of fighting Karen. She has been HOA president for 6 years, and she treats it like a personal fiefdom. The board always sides with her because, frankly, nobody else wants the job. Being on the HOA board means dealing with Karen full-time. What if I just do not pay? The fines accumulate. Eventually, they can put a lien on your house. I know that sounds extreme, but the bylaws you signed when you bought your place give them that authority." Dave on Maple Street tried to fight a fine 3 years ago. He was right, the fine was bogus, but by the time he gave up and paid it, the penalties had tripled the amount. I thanked Marcus and hung up. Then I sat at my kitchen table and actually read through the complete HOA bylaws for the first time since buying my house. The document was 87 pages long. It covered everything from acceptable dog breeds to the exact specifications for holiday decorations to the required height range for grass during growing season. Section 12.3.7, the one cited in my fine, stated, "All outdoor equipment, tools, and seasonal items must be stored in a manner that minimizes visual impact on the community aesthetic. Storage should be in garages, sheds, or designated screened areas not visible from common areas or neighboring properties." The problem was interpretation. My shovel was not visible from the street. It was barely visible from my own driveway unless you walked right up to my garage. But Karen had apparently decided that any possible visibility from any angle constituted a violation. I looked up Karen's address in the HOA directory. She lived on Birch Lane, which was on the other side of the neighborhood. On a whim, I got dressed in proper winter gear and decided to take a walk. Pinewood Estates was designed to look like a New England postcard. All the houses were variations on colonial and craftsman styles, painted in approved shades of white, beige, gray, and muted blue. The streets had names like Oak Drive, Maple Street, and Pine Circle. Every mailbox was identical black metal with brass numbers. Every lawn was uniform. Every driveway was paved with the same charcoal-colored asphalt. It took me 15 minutes to walk to Karen's house. It was a large colonial with white siding and black shutters, positioned on a corner lot with extra landscaping. And there, visible from the sidewalk, was a decorative garden wagon filled with pine boughs and red berries as a winter display. I took a photo. Then I walked around the neighborhood for another 30 minutes. I was not looking for violations specifically, but I was curious about what constituted acceptable outdoor displays versus finnable offenses. What I found was that most people had nothing visible. No shovels, no trash cans, no garden tools. Everything was tucked away. The neighborhood looked sterile and lifeless, like a movie set rather than a place where actual people lived. When I got home, I found another notice on my door. This one stated that I had until Friday at 5 to remove the visible snow shovel, or the fine would double to $100. That was when something inside me snapped. I had always been a rule follower. I paid my taxes on time. I voted in every election. I kept my lawn mowed and my house maintained. But this was not about rules. This was about power and control, about someone with too much authority and too little oversight using that power to harass people over meaningless violations. I went back inside and did some research. Vermont has specific laws about HOA authority. They can enforce aesthetic standards, but those standards have to be reasonable and consistently applied. More importantly, they cannot restrict access to mail delivery. That is a federal issue. Interfering with mail service is a crime under federal law. An idea began forming. I spent the rest of Tuesday and all of Wednesday documenting everything. I took photos of my snow shovel from every angle, showing that it was not visible from the street or from any neighboring property. I took photos of Karen's decorative garden wagon. I went through the neighborhood Facebook group and compiled screenshots of all the fines issued that week, along with the comments from residents describing where their shovels had been placed. On Thursday morning, it snowed 6 inches. I woke up early and cleared my driveway, my front walk, and the sidewalk in front of my house. City ordinance required homeowners to clear their sidewalks within 24 hours of snowfall. Then, I did something petty but satisfying. I took my snow shovel and walked to the neighborhood mailbox cluster where Karen received her mail. Pinewood Estates had centralized mail delivery. Instead of individual mailboxes at each house, there were 6 cluster box units positioned throughout the neighborhood. Each unit served about 20 houses. Karen's cluster was at the end of Birch Lane, in a small landscaped area with decorative stones and evergreen shrubs. I used my snow shovel to build a wall of snow directly in front of the mailbox cluster. Not blocking the boxes themselves, but blocking the walking path to access them. I piled the snow 3 feet high and 4 feet deep. Then I left my blue plastic snow shovel sticking out of the top of the snow pile like a flag. It was petty. It was childish. It was also technically not illegal. I was not blocking the mailboxes, just creating a temporary snow obstacle in a common area. Anyone could clear the snow. They just needed a shovel to do it. I went home and waited. The phone call came at 11 o'clock. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Karen's voice, tight with anger, informed me that I had created a safety hazard and that I needed to clear the snow immediately or face additional fines. I deleted the voicemail. The next call came at noon. Then another at 1. Then my email inbox started filling up. All from Karen, each message escalating in tone. The last one, which arrived at 3, threatened legal action. I responded to that one. I wrote, "Dear Miss Crawford, I am confused by your messages. I spent this morning fulfilling my civic duty by clearing snow from my property and assisting with snow management in our community common areas. If there is a specific bylaw about where snow can be placed within common areas, please direct me to that section. I have reviewed the bylaws thoroughly and found no such restriction. I assume this means snow placement in common areas is not regulated. Sincerely, Vincent Garrison. Friday morning brought another 4 inches of snow. I cleared my driveway and sidewalk again, then added to the snow wall at the mailbox cluster. My shovel remained proudly displayed on top. Around 10 in the morning, I saw Karen's silver Lexus SUV pull into the mailbox area. She got out, assessed the situation, and I could see her visibly tense even from my distant vantage point where I was watching through binoculars from my home office window. She was wearing expensive winter gear, the kind you buy at boutique outdoor stores rather than actual sporting goods places. She tried to walk around the snow pile, but the landscaping design of that particular cluster area meant there was no easy alternate path. She got back in her car and left. 20 minutes later, Marcus called me. "Dude, what did you do?" "Karen just posted in the Facebook group that you are preventing residents from accessing their mail and that she is calling the police." "I did not prevent anything. I just moved some snow. Anyone can clear it if they want." "I saw the photos someone posted." "Did you really stick your shovel in the pile?" "I did not want to get another fine for having a visible shovel on my property. That seemed like a safe place to store it." Marcus started laughing. This is the most excitement Pinewood Estates has seen in years. People are losing their minds in the comments. Some folks think you are a hero, others think you have lost it. What does Karen's post say exactly? Hang on, I will read it. Okay, here. Attention residents. Due to the destructive and harassing actions of one resident, access to the Birch Lane mail cluster has been deliberately blocked. This is a federal offense as it interferes with mail delivery. I have documented this violation, and am working with local authorities to resolve the situation immediately. This type of behavior will not be tolerated in our community. Then she has like 4 photos of your snow pile. Did she mention me by name? No, but everyone knows it is you because of the shovel discussions this week. After I hung up with Marcus, I checked the Facebook group myself. The comments section under Karen's post was a war zone. Several people pointed out that Karen had been the one to start this fight by issuing unreasonable fines. Others argued that 2 wrongs do not make a right. A few people were clearly enjoying the drama and posting popcorn emojis. Then I saw that Karen had posted an update. She had contacted the Burlington Police Department, and an officer would be arriving soon to take a report. I went to my closet and got out my camera with the good zoom lens. If the police were coming, I wanted documentation of that conversation. The police cruiser arrived at 1:30. A single officer, probably in his mid-30s, parked near the mailbox cluster and got out. Karen pulled up right behind him. I was too far away to hear the conversation, but I could see body language. Karen was gesturing animatedly at the snow pile and my shovel. The officer walked around the area, examined the pile, and appeared to be taking notes. The conversation lasted maybe 10 minutes. Then the officer got back in his cruiser and left. Karen stood there for a long moment before getting in her Lexus and driving away. She did not clear the snow. My doorbell rang at 2:15. The same police officer was standing on my front porch. "Vincent Garrison?" he asked. "That is me. I am Officer Reeves with Burlington PD. I received a complaint about a blocked mailbox cluster on Birch Lane. The HOA president seems to think you are responsible. I moved some snow this morning. There has been a lot of it lately, as you know." "Right. Can I ask why you placed the snow specifically in front of the mailbox access?" "I needed somewhere to put it while managing the common areas." "I did not block the mailboxes themselves. Anyone who wants to access their mail just needs to clear the walking path. Should not take more than a few minutes with a shovel." Officer Reeves looked at me with an expression that suggested he had dealt with HOA drama before. "Sir, the HOA president says this is retaliation for a fine she issued you earlier this week. The HOA has policies about snow removal. I am doing my part to keep common areas maintained. By piling snow in front of mailboxes. By relocating snow within common areas, which is not prohibited by any bylaw or city ordinance I am aware of." Officer Reeves sighed. "Look, I understand HOA disputes can get frustrating, but interfering with mail delivery is a federal issue. If the Postal Service cannot deliver mail because of that snow pile, you could face charges. Has the Postal Service complained? Not yet. Mail has not been delivered today. Well, if they do complain, I would be happy to clear a path. But I would need my snow shovel to do that, and unfortunately the HOA has fined me for storing my shovel on my own property. I had to find alternative storage." Officer Reeves closed his eyes briefly. "This is about the shovel fine, among other things. I am going to give you some advice, off the record. Whatever point you are trying to make here, it is not worth escalating this into criminal charges. Clear the snow. Fight the fine through proper channels. Do not give the HOA ammunition to make your life miserable." "I appreciate the advice, officer. But you are not going to take it." "I have not decided yet." He handed me a card with his contact information. "When this gets out of hand, and it will, call me directly instead of dialing 911. We have better things to do than referee HOA disputes." After Officer Reeves left, I sat down and really thought about what I was doing. He was right that this could escalate, but the principle of the thing bothered me. Karen had issued unjustified fines to multiple residents over something as absurd as visible snow shovels in the middle of a Vermont winter. She was using her authority as HOA president to bully people, and everyone just accepted it because fighting back was too much trouble. I decided to wait and see what happened with the mail delivery. The mail carrier arrived at 4:30. I watched from my window as the USP's truck pulled up to the Birch Lane cluster. The carrier got out, saw the snow pile, and stood there for a moment. Then she pulled out her phone. 5 minutes later, a USP supervisor truck arrived. The supervisor, a woman in her 50s wearing a Postal Service jacket, examined the situation. She and the mail carrier talked for a few minutes, then the supervisor took photos with her phone. My phone rang. "Blocked number," I answered. "This is Deborah Chen from the United States Postal Service. I am trying to deliver mail to the Birch Lane cluster box in Pinewood Estates. There is a snow pile blocking access. You know anything about this?" I moved some snow earlier. I did not realize it would cause access issues. "The snow needs to be cleared immediately. We cannot deliver mail if we cannot access the boxes. This is a federal requirement." "I understand. I can clear it. I just need to retrieve my snow shovel first." "Where is your shovel?" "Stuck in the snow pile. I will be there in 10 minutes. I bundled up and walked to Birch Lane. The postal supervisor was still there, along with the mail carrier, and now Karen, who must have been monitoring the situation somehow. "Mr. Garrison," Karen said as I approached, her voice dripping with false politeness. "How considerate of you to finally address this situation." "Happy to help," I said. I pulled my shovel from the snow pile and began clearing a path to the mailbox cluster. It took about 15 minutes. The postal supervisor watched without comment. Karen watched while making notes on her phone. When I finished, the mail carrier delivered the accumulated mail to the various boxes. The supervisor came over to me. "Sir, deliberately blocking mail access is a federal offense. I am going to have to file a report about this incident." "I understand." For the record, I did not deliberately block access. I was managing snow in the common area. The HOA has been issuing fines for residents storing snow shovels on their own property, so I was trying to find alternative storage solutions. The supervisor looked confused. They fine you for having a snow shovel. Visible snow shovels, yes. It is in violation of the community aesthetic standards. She looked at Karen. Is that true? Karen's expression tightened. Our bylaws have specific provisions about outdoor storage. Mr. Garrison is oversimplifying a complex issue. It seems like a pretty simple issue to me. You live in Vermont. People need snow shovels. The supervisor turned back to me. I will note the context in my report. Try to find a better place for your shovel in the future. After the Postal Service vehicles left, Karen and I stood facing each other in the February cold. This is harassment, she said. I am adding additional fines for your behavior today. Deliberate obstruction of common areas, misuse of HOA property, and creating a public nuisance. What HOA property did I misuse? The snow itself is part of the common area. So moving snow within a common area is misuse of HOA property. When done with malicious intent, yes. I would argue that issuing arbitrary fines for visible snow shovels during winter shows malicious intent. But I guess we will let the board decide at the March meeting. You are not going to win this, Mr. Garrison. Maybe not. But I am going to make sure everyone in this neighborhood understands exactly what kind of person is running the HOA. I walked back home with my shovel. The next few days were relatively quiet. I received formal notices of the additional fines Karen had mentioned, totaling $300 on top of the original $50. The neighborhood Facebook group continued to debate the situation, with most people now firmly in one camp or the other. Some residents started openly criticizing Karen's leadership. Others defended her, saying that rules were rules and I should not have retaliated. On Tuesday, 6 days after the original fine, I received a certified letter from a law firm representing the Pinewood Estates, HOA. The letter stated that I owed $350 in fines, that my actions constituted a pattern of harassment against the HOA president, and that if I did not pay the fines and issue a written apology within 7 days, the HOA would pursue legal action including but not limited to a lien against my property and a civil lawsuit for damages. I called a real estate attorney that afternoon. Her name was Lisa Martinez, and she specialized in HOA disputes. I have heard about this situation, she said after I introduced myself. The Pinewood Estates snow shovel saga. You have become somewhat famous in local real estate circles. Great. That is exactly what I was hoping for, she laughed. Tell me your version of what happened. I walked her through everything. The original fine, the bylaw language, the inconsistent enforcement evidenced by Karen's decorative garden wagon, the snow pile incident, and the escalating fines. Do you have documentation of all this? She asked. Photos, screenshots, copies of every notice and email. Good. Here is my assessment. The original fine is questionable. The bylaw language is vague enough that you could argue your shovel placement was reasonable. The additional fines for the snow pile situation are going to be harder to defend. You definitely engaged in malicious compliance there, and while I appreciate the creativity, it does not look great from a legal standpoint. So I should just pay. I did not say that. I said it would be hard to defend. But here is the thing about HOAs. They rely on people being too intimidated or too tired to fight back. Most of these cases never go to court because the homeowner caves. If you are willing to actually fight this, we might be able to use the discovery process to expose other issues with how this HOA operates. What kind of issues? Inconsistent enforcement is a big one. If we can show that the HOA president has been selectively enforcing rules, that undermines their authority significantly. Also, HOA boards have fiduciary duties to the community. If Karen has been using fines as a revenue generation scheme rather than legitimate rule enforcement, that is a problem. How much is this going to cost me? My retainer is $2,000. If this goes to actual litigation, it could be considerably more. You need to decide if this is worth it to you financially and emotionally. HOA disputes are exhausting. I thought about it for approximately 10 seconds. Let us do it. Lisa sent a response to the law firm representing the HOA. Her letter stated that I disputed all fines, that the bylaw enforcement was arbitrary and inconsistent, and that I would be filing a formal complaint with the HOA board regarding the conduct of the board president. She requested copies of all fines issued in the past year, all HOA financial records, and all communications between board members regarding enforcement decisions. The response came fast. The HOA's lawyer sent back a letter stating that the HOA was not required to provide that information to individual homeowners, that the fines were legitimate, and that they would proceed with placing a lien on my property if payment was not received within 7 days. Lisa filed a motion in Vermont Superior Court for Burlington County. She requested an injunction preventing the HOA from placing a lien pending resolution of the dispute, and she requested the court to order the HOA to produce the documents she had asked for. That got their attention. 3 days later, I received a call from someone named Donald Perry, who introduced himself as a member of the Pinewood Estates HOA board. He sounded tired. "Mr. Garrison, I am hoping we can resolve this situation without involving the courts." "I am listening." "The board has reviewed your case. We agree that perhaps the enforcement of the bylaw regarding your snow shovel was overly strict. We are willing to waive the original $50 fine and the subsequent fines related to the mailbox incident. In exchange for, we would like you to drop the court motion and the request for HOA documents." "Why do you not want to turn over the documents?" There was a long pause. "Mr. Garrison, I am going to be frank with you. I have been on this board for 2 years and I am tired of it. Karen runs everything. The rest of us just rubber stamp whatever she wants because fighting her is exhausting. But your lawsuit has made people start asking questions. Questions about how much money the HOA has collected in fines, where that money goes, why certain people seem to get fined more than others. And you think there might be problems with the answers. I think there might be things that do not look good when examined closely. I am asking you to drop this because I do not want to deal with the fallout. But honestly, between you and me, someone probably should examine this stuff closely. Then let us do that. Cooperate with the document request. If everything is legitimate, you have nothing to worry about. And if Karen has been doing shady stuff, then the homeowners in this community deserve to know." Donald sighed. "I will talk to the other board members, no promises." 2 days later, Lisa called me with an update. The HOA's lawyer contacted me. They are going to comply with the document request. They also want to schedule a mediation session to try to resolve this without trial. That was fast. My guess is someone on the board got nervous about what might be in those documents. We will get them next week. In the meantime, the court granted the preliminary injunction. They cannot place a lien on your property until this is resolved. The documents arrived as a massive PDF file via email. Lisa and I spent an entire Saturday going through them in her office, drinking coffee and highlighting relevant sections. What we found was damning. Over the past 3 years, Karen had issued more than 400 fines to Pinewood Estates residents. The fines ranged from $25 to $500, covering violations like unapproved holiday decorations, grass height exceeding limits by half an inch, trash cans visible for more than 12 hours after pickup, and yes, visible outdoor equipment. The total amount collected in fines was over $60,000. According to the HOA budget documents, fine revenue was supposed to go into the general fund for community maintenance and improvements. But when we cross-referenced the fine revenue with actual expenditures, there were major discrepancies. The HOA had taken in $60,000 in fines, but had only spent about $30,000 on legitimate community expenses over that same period. The remaining $30,000 had been paid out to something called Crawford Property Management Services. Lisa pulled up the Vermont Business Registry. Crawford Property Management Services was registered to Karen Crawford. It was her company. "Is that even legal?" I asked. "It depends. If she disclosed the conflict of interest to the board and the homeowners approved it, then maybe. But I am guessing she did not disclose it." We kept digging. Crawford Property Management Services was supposedly providing administrative services to the HOA. Things like violation monitoring, fine collection, and property inspections. But the contract had been signed 3 years ago, right after Karen became HOA president, and there was no record of the homeowners voting to approve an outside management company. "This is embezzlement," Lisa said. She created a management company, hired herself to provide services to the HOA that she was already supposed to provide as president, and has been funneling HOA money to her own business. What do we do with this? We have a mediation scheduled for next Friday. We go into that meeting and we lay this out. We tell them that, unless they want this to become a criminal matter, Karen needs to resign immediately, return all the money she has taken, and the HOA needs to refund all questionable fines issued over the past 3 years. They are never going to agree to that. Then we go to the police and the state attorney general. Vermont takes HOA fraud seriously. The mediation was held at a conference room in a downtown Burlington office building. Present were me, Lisa, Karen, the HOA's attorney, and the 3 other board members, Donald Perry, Susan Kim, and Robert Walsh. The mediator, a pleasant woman in her 60s named Margaret, started by explaining the process. Everyone would have a chance to present their position, and her job was to help us find common ground. Lisa cut her off politely. "Before we begin, my client and I have discovered information during the discovery process that changes the nature of this dispute. We need to discuss it before we can talk about resolution." Karen looked confused. Her lawyer looked concerned. Lisa opened her laptop and displayed the financial documents on the conference room screen. She walked through everything we had found: the excessive fines, the payments to Crawford Property Management Services, the lack of homeowner approval for the management contract. "Over 3 years, Miss Crawford has diverted approximately $30,000 in HOA funds to her personal business. This is embezzlement and breach of fiduciary duty. We are prepared to provide this information to law enforcement unless an immediate resolution is reached." The room went silent. Karen's face had gone pale. Her lawyer spoke first. "These are serious allegations. My client denies any wrongdoing. The management company was approved by the board." "Was it?" Lisa looked at Donald, Susan, and Robert. "Did you 3 vote to approve hiring Crawford Property Management Services?" The 3 board members looked at each other. Donald spoke. Karen presented it as something that had already been handled. She said the previous board had approved it before we joined. "Did you verify that?" "No, we trusted her." Lisa turned back to Karen's lawyer. "So the board did not approve it, and the homeowners certainly did not. Miss Crawford unilaterally created a scheme to pay herself HOA funds with no oversight. The services were legitimate, Karen said, her voice shaking slightly. I did the work. I spent hours every week monitoring the neighborhood, documenting violations, managing the fine process. That is what the HOA president is supposed to do, Lisa said. You do not get to pay yourself extra for doing the job you volunteered for. More importantly, you created a financial incentive to issue as many fines as possible, which explains why fine revenue increased by 300% after you became president. The mediator interjected. Perhaps we should take a short break. During the break, I stepped outside with Donald, Susan, and Robert. Did you three really not know about this? I asked. Susan shook her head. Karen controlled everything. She sent us monthly financial reports, but they were always high-level summaries. We never saw the actual transactions. Why did you not ask for more detail? Because, Robert said, she made it clear that questioning her was unwelcome. Last year, Donald asked about a landscaping expense that seemed high. Karen spent the next 2 meetings lecturing us about trust and team dynamics. It was easier to just let her run things. So she has been running a scam for 3 years and nobody checked. Apparently, Donald said. The question now is what we do about it. When we reconvened, Karen's lawyer requested a private conference with his client. They stepped into a side room for 20 minutes. When they returned, the lawyer addressed the room. My client is willing to resign from the HOA board effective immediately. She will dissolve Crawford Property Management Services. However, she maintains that the payments were for legitimate services rendered and she will not be returning any money. Then we go to the police, Lisa said simply. You have no proof of criminal intent. We have proof that she paid herself $30,000 from HOA funds without proper authorization. A prosecutor can prove intent. Karen finally spoke, and her voice was different now, smaller. I did nothing wrong. I worked hard for this community. I spent hours every week keeping property values high and maintaining standards. If I did not enforce the rules, this place would fall apart. You issued a fine because someone had a snow shovel next to their garage, I said. In Vermont. In February. You have been using your position to harass people and generate revenue for yourself. That is not community service. That is a protection racket. Her face flushed with anger. You do not understand what it takes to run a community like this. People like you, who think the rules do not apply to them, who leave their things lying around and do not care about how it affects everyone else's property values. My snow shovel affected nobody's property value. You were on a power trip. The mediation fell apart after that. Karen and her lawyer left. Margaret, the mediator, looked exhausted. The 3 remaining board members sat in stunned silence. Lisa closed her laptop. I am going to recommend my client file a police report. You 3 should get your own lawyer, separate from the HOA's lawyer, because you are going to need to cooperate with the investigation. Over the next few days, things moved quickly. I filed a detailed report with the Burlington Police Department. Lisa provided all the financial documents we had uncovered. The police forwarded everything to the Vermont Attorney General's office, which has a division that handles HOA fraud. The neighborhood Facebook group exploded when word got out. People started comparing notes about fines they had received, looking for patterns of abuse. Several residents mentioned that they had been fined repeatedly, while others seemed to never get any violations. One person discovered that houses owned by Karen's friends had received 0 fines over 3 years, despite having visible violations like oversized yard decorations and unapproved paint colors. A petition started circulating demanding a full audit of HOA finances and a recall election for the entire board. 2 weeks after the failed mediation, a Vermont State Police detective came to my house to take an official statement. His name was Detective Marshall. He was thorough and professional, asking detailed questions about the timeline of events and the discovery of the financial irregularities. "I need to be clear about something," he said. "What she did is definitely wrong. Whether it is criminal depends on proving intent to defraud. She is going to argue this was just sloppy bookkeeping and misunderstanding of HOA rules. She created a fake company to pay herself. The company is real and registered. She is going to say she genuinely believed she could charge for her time. It becomes he said, she said without more evidence of deliberate fraud. What about the selective enforcement? The fact that her friends never got fined? That is unethical but probably not criminal. However, it helps establish a pattern of corrupt behavior, which strengthens the overall case." Detective Marshall spent 2 more weeks investigating. He interviewed the other board members, reviewed 3 years of HOA meeting minutes, and contacted several residents who had received large fines. In mid-April, as the Vermont winter finally started releasing its grip and patches of grass began appearing through melting snow, Karen Crawford was arrested. The charges were theft by deception, a felony under Vermont law, and criminal breach of fiduciary duty. The arrest warrant alleged that she had knowingly created a fraudulent scheme to embezzle HOA funds by creating a management company and authorizing payments to herself without proper disclosure or homeowner approval. Her arraignment was scheduled for April 23rd. I did not attend, but Lisa went and reported back. Karen pleaded not guilty. Her lawyer argued that she had made administrative mistakes but had no criminal intent. The judge set bail at $10,000 and scheduled a preliminary hearing for June. The HOA, now operating under emergency bylaws with Donald as interim president, hired a forensic accountant to conduct a full audit. The results, released in May, showed the problem was even bigger than we initially thought. Karen had been manipulating HOA finances in multiple ways. She had approved unnecessary maintenance contracts with vendors who gave her kickbacks. She had inflated the cost of community improvements and pocketed the difference. The total amount she had stolen was closer to $70,000. Armed with the forensic audit, the Attorney General's office upgraded the charges. Karen now faced multiple felony counts that could result in years in prison. The Pinewood Estates community was in chaos. A special election was held to replace the entire HOA board. I was asked to run but declined. I had no interest in HOA politics. I just wanted to live in my house without being harassed about where I kept my snow shovel. The new board, led by a retired accountant named Patricia who had lived in the community for 15 years, immediately instituted reforms. They suspended all fines pending a review of the bylaws. They hired an independent property management company with no ties to board members. They established quarterly financial transparency reports available to all homeowners. And they officially repealed Section 12.3.7, the bylaw about outdoor equipment storage. The new rules simply stated that equipment should be stored in a reasonably tidy manner. My $50 fine was officially voided, along with all the subsequent fines Karen had issued. The HOA even sent me a formal apology letter. Karen's criminal case went to trial in September. I was called as a witness. I testified about the original fine, the pattern of harassment, and the discovery of the financial fraud. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of her scheme. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They found her guilty on all counts, At sentencing in November, the judge was not sympathetic. Karen gave a tearful statement claiming she had only been trying to serve the community, that she had made mistakes but had never intended to harm anyone. The judge saw through it. He sentenced her to 4 years in prison and ordered her to pay full restitution of $73,000, the final tally of money she had stolen. He also imposed a fine of $25,000 and banned her from serving on any HOA board in Vermont for the rest of her life. As I sat in the courtroom listening to the sentence, I thought about how this had all started with a snow shovel. With Karen's need to control everything, to enforce petty rules that made no sense, to use her small amount of power to make other people's lives difficult. And I thought about how many other HOAs across America probably had their own versions of Karen Crawford. People who treated community leadership as personal fiefdoms, who abused their authority, who made life miserable for their neighbors over meaningless violations. After the sentencing, several of my neighbors who had attended the hearing invited me to lunch. We went to a local restaurant and spent 2 hours talking about everything that had happened. There was a sense of relief, like a weight had been lifted from the community. Marcus raised his beer. To Vincent, who had the guts to fight back over a snow shovel. To reasonable bylaws, I countered. And to never letting someone like Karen run things unchecked again. We drank to that. The following February, exactly 1 year after the original fine, Vermont got hit with a major snowstorm. 20 inches fell over 2 days. I spent hours clearing my driveway, my walkways, and helping several elderly neighbors with their properties. And when I was done, I left my blue plastic snow shovel leaning against my garage, right where it was practical and accessible. Nobody said a word. The neighborhood looked lived in now rather than sterile. People had basketball hoops in their driveways. Garden gnomes appeared in spring. Someone painted their shutters a shade of green that was probably not on the original approved color list, and nobody cared because it looked nice. Pinewood Estates was still a planned community with standards and rules, but they were reasonable rules enforced with common sense rather than zealotry. I ran into Donald one afternoon while getting my mail from the cluster box on Birch Lane. The area where I had built my petty snow pile was now just lawn and landscaping in the summer weather. "I never properly thanked you," Donald said. "For what?" "For blowing everything up. I knew something was wrong with how Karen ran things, but I did not have the energy to fight it. You forced everyone to pay attention. I was just tired of being harassed about a snow shovel." "Yeah, but you followed through. Most people would have paid the fine and moved on. You actually held her accountable." We talked for a few more minutes, then went our separate ways. That evening I sat on my back deck with a beer, watching the sun set over the Vermont mountains in the distance. I had lived in Pinewood Estates for 4 years now. It felt like home in a way it had not before, when every day brought anxiety about what arbitrary rule I might unknowingly violate. The HOA drama had been exhausting and expensive. The legal fees, the time, the stress of the investigation and trial. But it had been worth it, not just for me, but for everyone in the community who had been quietly suffering under Karen's regime. And I had learned something important. Systems only work when people hold them accountable. HOAs can serve legitimate purposes, maintaining common areas and reasonable community standards. But they can also become vehicles for petty tyrants when nobody questions their authority. All it took was one person willing to say no, willing to fight back, willing to endure the hassle and expense of standing up for principle, even if it started with something as simple as a snow shovel. The following spring, Patricia and the new HOA board organized a community barbecue, the first social event Pinewood Estates had held in years. Everyone was invited. People brought dishes to share. Kids played in the common areas. Someone set up a volleyball net. I brought my famous potato salad and spent the afternoon actually getting to know my neighbors beyond brief waves and small talk. There was a sense of community that had been missing before, strangled by Karen's oppressive rule enforcement. Near the end of the evening, Patricia made a short speech thanking everyone for being patient during the transition period and promising that the new board would operate transparently and fairly. "We are a community," she said. "That means we live together, work together, and sometimes disagree. But we treat each other with respect and common sense. The board is here to serve you, not to control you." People applauded. As I walked home that evening, my blue plastic snow shovel still visible next to my garage where it would remain until next winter, I felt genuinely content. The story of the Pinewood Estates HOA nightmare had spread beyond our small community. Local news had covered Karen's arrest and trial. HOA reform advocates had used it as an example of why stronger oversight was needed. Several Vermont legislators had even proposed new laws requiring HOAs to submit to independent financial audits and limiting their fine authority. My 15 minutes of fame as the snow shovel guy eventually faded. Life returned to normal. I went to work, maintained my house, shoveled my driveway when it snowed, and lived peacefully in my home without fear of arbitrary fines. But every time I see that blue snow shovel leaning against my garage, I remember what it represents. Not just a practical tool for managing Vermont winters, but a symbol of standing up to unreasonable authority, of refusing to be bullied, of holding people accountable when they abuse power. Sometimes the smallest acts of resistance matter the most. And sometimes, all it takes to change an entire system is one person with a snow shovel and the willingness to use it, metaphorically speaking, to clear away the obstacles blocking justice and common sense. The $73,000 Karen was ordered to pay in restitution got distributed back to homeowners over the following year. Every household in Pinewood Estates received a check based on the total fines they had paid during Karen's reign. Mine was for $350, covering all the fines she had issued plus a portion of the embezzled funds. I donated it to a Vermont legal aid organization that helps homeowners fight HOA abuse. Because while my story had a happy ending, I knew there were countless others dealing with their own versions of Karen Crawford, their own petty tyrants using HOA authority to make life miserable. If my experience could help even one person understand their rights and fight back against unreasonable HOA enforcement, then all the hassle and expense would be worth it. The last chapter of this saga came 2 years later when I got a call from a journalist writing a book about HOA corruption in America. She wanted to interview me about the Pinewood Estates case. We talked for over an hour. She was particularly interested in how the situation escalated, how a simple fine over a snow shovel had uncovered a major embezzlement scheme. "What would you say to someone else dealing with HOA harassment?" she asked at the end. I thought about it. Document everything. Know your rights. Read your actual bylaws, not just what the board tells you they say. And do not be afraid to push back when something is clearly unreasonable. Most of the time, HOA boards rely on people being too tired or intimidated to fight. But if you stand your ground and force them to justify their decisions, sometimes you will discover they have been getting away with things they should not. Any regrets? Just one. "I wish I had blocked Karen's mailbox access earlier." She laughed. That is still my favorite part of the story. The pettiness of it. Sometimes petty is the appropriate response to petty. The book came out the following year. My story was featured in a chapter titled, "When Small Fights Reveal Big Problems." The author used the Pinewood Estates case to illustrate how lack of oversight and accountability can enable HOA board members to abuse their positions. I bought a copy, but honestly could not bring myself to read it. I had lived through it once. That was enough. These days, Pinewood Estates is a genuinely pleasant place to live. The board operates efficiently and fairly. Fines are rare and reserved for actual violations that affect property values or safety. Nobody gets harassed about snow shovels or garden gnomes. Property values have actually increased since Karen's removal, contrary to her constant fear-mongering about how strict enforcement was necessary to maintain home prices. Turns out people value living in a community where they are treated like adults rather than constantly monitored for minor infractions. I still live in my house on Oak Drive. My snow shovel still leans against my garage in winter. My grass is sometimes a little too long in summer because I have better things to do than mow obsessively. My welcome mat is definitely wider than the old specifications allowed, and nobody bothers me about any of it, because that is how normal communities operate. The blue snow shovel has become something of a legend in the neighborhood. New residents hear the story and always want to see it. It is just a cheap plastic shovel, nothing special, but it represents something bigger. It represents the idea that ordinary people can fight back against systemic abuse. That standing up for principle matters. That nobody should have to live in fear of petty tyrants, even in something as mundane as a homeowners association. Karen Crawford served 2 years of her 4-year sentence before being released on parole. I heard through the neighborhood gossip network that she moved to New Hampshire after her release, starting over in a place where nobody knew about her crimes. I hope she learned something from the experience, though I doubt it. People like her rarely do, but at least she cannot hurt anyone else in Pinewood Estates. And that blue snow shovel, the catalyst for everything that followed, continues to stand as a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of defiance can topple the largest systems of oppression, even when that oppression is just a busybody HOA president with too much time and too much authority. Sometimes you just need a shovel and the willingness to make a point, no matter how petty that point might be. And sometimes, just sometimes, that petty point leads to justice.